Hello there, I'm Kevin Rothrock, the managing editor of Meduza's English language edition, and welcome back to another episode of The Naked Pravda. It's been a few weeks since our last episode, but today we've got a great show about the current Russian film and television industries, focusing largely on the effects of the invasion of Ukraine on Russian programming and the Russian box office. Longtime listeners of this podcast will know that I have a particular interest in movies and television, mainly because I'm a shit-for-brains American guy who watches far too much of it. And typically it's the popular culture mush that leaves you dumber for having seen it, but I still love it. One of the most amusing things to me about studying Russia for a living is how many of the Russians I've met over the years who are as familiar, if not more familiar, than my fellow Americans with Hollywood cinema and major American and British TV shows. You can spend a lifetime reading poetry and the classics and have deep, insightful conversations with Russians, I assume. But you can also chat them up about Neville Longbottom's character arc in the Harry Potter movies, or whether Season 8 of Game of Thrones was as bad as everybody says. It was pretty bad, most will admit. After Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February, 5 Hollywood giants, Disney, Warner Brothers, Universal, Sony Pictures, and Paramount, all stopped releasing new films in Russia. Netflix, which was producing and getting ready to release multiple shows in Russia for the domestic market, also suspended all of its service there, and Amazon Prime has halted its streaming in Russia as well. All this came just as the entertainment industry was hoping to rebound from 2 years of pandemic shutdowns and audience concerns and so on. Russian movie theaters could be on the verge of a massive collapse, and the country's streaming services, seemingly poised for a major expansion before the war, are now scrambling to maintain subscribers by restocking their catalogs in whatever way they can and hoping for success with original programming. So what will Russians do for their entertainment now?
I'd say that on broadcast television, the free-to-air channels, things are predominantly Russian. This Russian shows, Russian series, stuff that you have never heard of.
That's Ivan Philippov, who currently works as creative executive at film producer Alexander Rodnyansky's development company, AR Content. I reached him in Tbilisi, where he now lives with his family, and I asked him what kind of films and TV shows are popular with Russian audiences today.
Sometimes, usually in the evening on, CTC or TNT, you'll see good, recognizable and internationally well-known feature films, American films, British films, French films. You would rarely see a foreign television show because, as a rule, again, Russian, broadcast channels audience do not like international shows. But if you are talking about online, if you're talking about online platforms, that has sprung over the years in Russia. Like there were 5 big players who all wanted to be Netflix. And then there was Netflix. And then there's Amazon. And then there is, what else? Netflix, Amazon, and Apple
Disney
TV?
Plus?
No Disney Plus, no HBO Max, but Apple TV Plus, yes. So there you would see generally every international TV show that you want to watch, all the new releases, all the classics, and some original programming, some of which was good. And if you're talking about box office, theaters, almost I'd say 85% of it was Hollywood.
Okay.
Well, maybe on a good year it was 80, but good year for Russians.
For Russians, yeah.
But this is what drove the box office. This is bread and butter, and a touch of caviar is Hollywood, not Russian films. You would have maybe 3 to 5 extraordinary successful, commercially successful Russian films per year. 5 is a good number. 5 is a good year. You would have, a dozen, maybe more films that performed adequately, and about 2-3 dozens films that failed miserably or just failed.
Generally speaking, are there certain kinds of films and kinds of TV shows that resonate the best with Russian audiences? The ones that do succeed, this handful of movies that actually turn a profit, are they typically sci-fi, drama, comedy? Are they about, sports or history or
everything Marvel, everything DC, everything, James Bond, every spectacle, every Star Wars film, every big fantasy franchise.
And what about the Russian movies that succeeded?
Comedies tend to do very well. Russian so-called patriotic films sometimes did very well, but there's a fine line. Like there's a T-34, which is a very predictable and very by the numbers Russian, war film about the glorious past and the virtues of Russian nation that fought fascism, and which was basically like an action film with some propaganda motives added to the mixture. And then you would have something like Zoya, a story of Zoya Kosmodemyanskaya, which was not as big and which was rather, small in terms of budget and which crashed and burned. So if you just show, if you use just patriotism, you won't make any money. The stuff that was propaganda, the stuff that Medinsky loved, didn't, I think, ever made any serious money. It should have been a spectacle. You want to earn money, you need to entertain.
Right.
And Medinsky is not entertaining, and things he liked are not entertaining.
I also asked Ivan how well Russians know their own art house hits, the sorts of movies that win fans abroad.
Well, they're known to people who are interested in good international films. I don't know. Dean Paulbeck and Timur Balagov was on Barack Obama's top 10 films of the year. We had, Russian films got nominations for Golden Globe, Oscars.
Right.
We've been in Cannes, BAFTA, Andrei's film won César. So no, they were very well known for people who actually watch good movies.
What about in Russia? Are they well known there?
Well, if you're talking about known, yes. Did they make any money? No. Do good Russian films make any money in the box office? Not really. But this is I think it's important. There's this whole conversation about, do we need to cancel Russian culture right now abroad? So it's not an answer to this question. I don't think I have one, but it's just something that you need to keep in mind. Everything that ever was Russian in terms of film that crossed borders was always anti-state, always anti-Putin. Anything that was done to promote his message for propaganda purposes never made it through the borders. It could have been, relatively successful in Asia, in China, maybe sometimes, but never in the US, never in Europe. So, no, the good films were well known because, you would find easily 100 people who know who Andrei Zvyagintsov is, or even know who Kantemir Balagov is. But out of this 100, maybe 5 saw the films.
The problem is that it used to be pretty much the same before the war.
That's Lisa Surganova, the former editor-in-chief of Kinopoisk, which is essentially like Russia's version of IMDb. She's now the host of a podcast at Kinopoisk called В предыдущих сериях, which translates to Previously On, where she discusses television news and various television series. I asked her what content dominates Russia's streaming services right now.
So, like the movies that did the best in our national box office were Avengers, or big Disney movies, big Marvel movies. And the same with streaming shows. A lot of them were shows from Netflix, from Apple. The Disney Plus hadn't come to Russia yet, so I think the people watched it online, but illegally. But all the streaming services that were Game of Thrones also was a big hit because it was streamed in Russia.
HBO had a distributor in Russia, right? Like
it's
Media or whatever.
Mediatheka. It's actually it even has the title Home of HBO, which they are really proud of.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen to it now, but anyway.
Are they still carrying HBO content right now?
They carry the old content, but they didn't release the new series. And there is just a few days ago, I saw on Facebook, some of my friends posted, Mediatheka just posted a poster for the upcoming Game of Thrones prequel, House of Dragons. and they just posted a poster, and no way they would do that without
The rights.
So maybe something is going on, but for now they stopped releasing new episodes, and actually Kinopoisk, its partner of Mediatheka, also didn't get any new episodes. So some of the series, like for example Our Flag Means Death, on Kinopoisk and the Mediatheka, is stuck in a way that they released 2 episodes and then the sanctions hit, and HBO told them that they would not give them new episodes, and you can see only 2 first episodes, and then it's the new series are not the new episodes are not coming yet.
Right.
And a lot of series are like stuck in this position, but also in Russia, there was a trend in growing interest for national content, for national originals on streaming services, and a lot of them were actually quite popular. Like those released by Kinopoisk. Like just now, they released a TV series called Zero Patient about the first HIV patients in the Soviet Union in the end of the 80s, and it's extremely popular. But when you're talking about this popularity, you should also keep in mind that you don't have any new foreign TV series, any Western TV series coming at the same time
to compete with.
Yeah, to compete with.
So in terms of the Russian content that does well, I don't know like contemporary Russian TV or movies that well. So you've mentioned there's this show that's somewhat modeled on Chernobyl that addresses like the big state lies of the Soviet era. Is that a genre that's like very popular among Russians? Because I mean, what I'm aware of are like Последний Bogatyr is like this like action comedy family kind of friendly movie. Like that's big. That was a big success at the box office.
That's true. Yeah.
Comedies and reality TV seem to be pretty popular in terms of like entertainment on television. Like what are some, like, are there genres that dominate on TV and in movies, or is it kind of like random? It just some things succeed and it's not totally clear why. Are there trends in terms of, like, for instance, like Hollywood has like, it's in a superhero moment right now. There was like a zombie movie moment like 15 years ago. Like it goes through these like bizarre kind of like trends and waves. Is there anything like that in Russian entertainment?
Yeah, if you're talking about the last decade, not like the specific moment, because as I told you, the specific moment is quite different because everything has changed so abruptly that it's actually the movie companies are releasing anything they have, like anything they have ready, and most of those movies are like B-rated comedies. So yeah, they get some money in the box office, but it's just because people don't have any other choice, and it's the problem. But before the war, the most popular genres were, again, superhero movies, and big sci-fi movies like The Dune or like Russian sci-fi movies as well, and comedies also. Like I think the biggest hit in the national box office was the movie called Holop. It got released like in the end of 2019, just before the pandemic, and it was a huge hit. And it's like a comedy of of a young guy who is like really obsessed with himself and doesn't really know how to behave. So, and he's a rich guy, so his father sends him to some kind of like punishment village, and he wakes up one day and he realizes that he's like in the 19th century Russia, where the how do you call it,
peasants and whatnot.
The peasants, and the.
Is he actually in the past, or is it just everyone pretending?
No, it's kind of like the Truman Show for him, to kind of like for him to change his behavior, and he does change it, and then he becomes a guy who serves in this kind of punishment camp, which is a really crazy idea, but it was hugely popular. And like big family movies like this, and also Последний Bogatyr, which is also a big family movie, but it was released and made by Disney, by Russian Disney office. So I don't know what's going to happen to it next.
Do you have any sense of how much like Disney? I know Disney they contributed a lot of money to that movie.
Right.
Is it just that they gave money and helped like promote it, or did they do other things for that movie as well?
I think it was like a Disney production in Russia. So like they don't have a studio, like Disney studio here, but of course they worked with other studios and production companies on this. But if you ask people in the market, if you ask people in the industry, they would say it's a Disney movie. So like it's Disney money, and it's everything. Marketing is Disney, and it's their idea, and it was born in this office.
So most of people and professionals in the industry suppose that it will be the future, like co-production, and especially with US companies, because they know how to do business. So that's why everybody was dreaming to get to Netflix or something.
That's Egor Isaev, a Russian filmmaker and TV and film researcher who now lives in Berlin. I asked him about the significance of Hollywood money becoming available to Russian movie studios through co-production and distribution deals, and what it means that money is now gone.
I remember that Последний богатырь, the last night, so he got something about 1 billion rubles in the box office. So that was a record for that year. So basically, a lot of people were trying to make the co-production, and not just with the US, but also with European countries. For example, a lot of documentary film productions were trying to cooperate with European colleagues on TV channels, for example.
Do you have any sense of how the Russian entertainment industry has responded to the loss of its distribution deals with like Hollywood production studios? Like just in terms of like what's playing in movie theaters now, like what's showing on Russian TV besides news stuff? Like, are they still able to show Hollywood production content, or have they switched to like Iranian soap operas and Indian Bollywood stuff? Like, has it changed?
Yes, the thing is like there are a lot of things. So the first one is that they are trying to screen the classics. So maybe you've heard that they run the Balabanov movies and some Tarkovsky movies like a month before. Then the second trend is to put money in the Russian film production process and to get twice more films next year.
Yeah.
And the third trend is to screen actually Hollywood films, but somehow, I don't know, is it a piracy or not? Because like Russian cinema theaters now are telling that actually Disney and Warner Brothers, they avoid the law, they went away. So we are doing legally to screen the films. But the thing is that they tried to screen Batman, and it got only fifth or sixth position in the box office. So it wasn't a disaster, but somehow we can call it that way.
And why do you think it didn't make that much money? Is it just it wasn't on enough screens, or it wasn't dubbed well, or like Russians now don't want to watch Batman, or like what do you think the
time passed?
Yeah.
So
the marketing was done, so nobody knew about it anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, and like for example, international premiere was in March or something,
right?
And so now we got June. Yeah. That's why all who want to see that movie do it
download it already. Right. Okay.
So, and of course, you mentioned about the Iranian films and Indian films. That's true, actually. Now I heard a lot of things that Russian producers are trying to buy the TV series films from Turkey, China, India, and Iran.
Yeah.
So that will be probably the solution for that VOD services and for international box office. International screen companies in Russia. And maybe you've heard that like 2 days before, maybe or something, the Moscow International Film Festival announced a new way of how they will the program the festival, and they say that they will discover new lands.
Okay.
So that's curious because it's somehow similar with that old post-colonial discourse, but still goes in some other direction. So now they are trying to say that European and US market actually look only to themselves. And so Russian film industry will discover all other world. So we need to see what will happen.
Do you have any sense of how audiences are responding to the changes? I mean, like, does it matter if they're getting Netflix stuff or they're getting Bollywood stuff? Like, do Russians just want to have something to put on, or is there a genuine love of Stranger Things and, you know, Top Gun or whatever? Like, what do Russians actually? I mean, you said that it was Hollywood movies that dominated the box office. If you swap out Hollywood for Bollywood, do Russians care? Will they go to the movies less, or will they go to the movies the same amount? Like, what's your expectation?
Yeah, like we see the loss of the market to 75% compare to the previous year. So they do care.
Yeah.
And if you want to, like Bollywood is a special film production. So I'm fond of Indian movies, but the thing is that the narrative and the stage playing differs from the European and American directing of films. So, and how the audience is watching the films. So that's why probably we can say that like Russians will enjoy that movies, but it will take years, to understand the montage, the mise en scène. So it seems to me that before that, cinema theaters will be in ruin.
What about in terms of funding for Russian television and films? Is it mostly private funded in Russia? Is it mostly Ministry of Culture funded? Like, in terms of sources of money for making this content, where do most people find it?
The big part of it comes from the state, and there are two organizations that give you the money. One is the Ministry of Culture, and it gives money mostly to like festival movies or art house movies, or this kind of like small budget movies. Their idea is, at least was, to support the culture, right, in the movie industry. And the other one is called Fond Kino, the Cinema Fund, which basically it's more of like an economic enterprise in terms that it gives you money and then it expects you to give at least part of it back.
I see.
So it's an organization that funds the cinema industry, but it only funds the successful, or at least the projects that it believes in.
Yeah.
And they had like the system of funding like leader companies, they were called, like the big production companies, and they would give them more money because they showed like very good results, and then they would support some small companies. And then some it's a difficult system. Some companies, sometimes you have to give some money back, sometimes you don't have to give anything back, sometimes you have to give like a lot back. And
right.
There were also some lawsuits that they started because some companies didn't give them the money that they were supposed to give. So it's one part. It's like the state funded thing. There is one organization that appeared like a couple of years ago, also state funded thing. It's called Institut Развития Интернета, and it's more about streaming services. So they get a lot of money to produce content, and it's mostly youth-oriented content. So it's an idea that the government, the state, has to win back the young audience. So they have to, to make some content for them, like popular content. I think this year they got like 50 billion rubles 15 billion rubles for this, like for producing some content for the streaming services, and it's a lot. And they were becoming one of the biggest players in this industry. And now I think they will be even bigger because they still have their money, and the others, like the commercial businesses, are losing it, and it's a big problem for everyone. But also there were a lot of private money, mostly from the streaming services. Some of them are also state affiliated, of course, like NMG, which is basically run by Alina Kabaeva and like some friends of the president. But others like Start or Kinopoisk or Oka were less state although Oka was also part of Sberbank, which is the biggest state bank in the country, or like Eevee, which was the biggest streaming service up until I think last year. So they had private money, like the money earned with their subscriptions, or like kind of invested in them by someone, like by Yandex. Yandex invested a lot of money in Kinopoisk, and Kinopoisk then could produce some expensive shows. So this is the private part, and also there was a fund by Roman Abramovich, Kinoprime, and it was also kind of like not really big fund, but mostly for funding those festival movies, like Serebrennikov for someone else. And that's why actually Kirill Serebrennikov supported Roman Abramovich in Cannes Festival, because he said, he supports us, the people of art. And it's true, actually. Abramovich really invested a lot of money in Russian art. But yeah, the West still has some questions.
Sure. So it sounds like Russia has its own streaming wars. Like they very much.
Yeah. And it was a booming market, and was actually like on the rise. And people around me were talking, like 5 years ago when I came to Kinopoisk, it still didn't have its streaming service. And it was like a dream, a utopia, and no one really know would it be successful or not. But then when we started it, and then it became to grow, and then quickly we realized that it's actually the only way to earn some money, that the advertisement industry is declining, like everywhere in the world, I guess, and that the subscription, the idea of subscriptions and business model based on subscriptions is actually much more successful and stable, and people trust you with their money if they get good content from you. And it's a problem now because a lot of streaming services have less and less to show.
So it sounds like the Russian streaming services, they were able to turn a profit, but there's now a worry that a lot of that was dependent on having catalogs full of Hollywood content and American television.
Yeah, and actually getting new movies, like catalogs are still there for now at least. So
right, but if they're not being updated, people are reluctant to keep paying for it.
Yeah, but like I told you, the problem with HBO, if you don't get new shows, then what's the point in being a subscriber of Mediatheka in the end?
Right. In terms of the box office in the Russian film industry, is it possible that the state will just swoop in and dump more money on the industry? And so even if like people aren't buying tickets to keep the business afloat through market economics, it'll just sustain itself as a subsidized business?
Okay, this is a tricky question because there are a number of answers I can give you. Like there's a rational answer, which is speaking rationally. I believe right now there are about 100 different things that the Russian state should be thinking before they will be thinking about saving movie theaters. Yeah. They're like serious economic stuff going on that needs to be addressed before saving your local theater. Yeah. That's a rational thing. Then there's a practical consideration. I believe that right now, we all know what happened to the independent media, right? I believe that the same thing will gradually happen to movies and TV series, something that was originally planned for platforms like Kinopoisk or Oka or Start, something that they will develop as the time goes by. I believe Russian state will very soon realize that there are only as many people you can get through Russian television channels.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are people like me who never watched Russian television. There are younger generations. There are people who never they don't turn the TV on.
Right.
And propaganda will need to find ways to get to them. And movies will be considered a primary candidate for that.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of money will be stolen and a lot of money will be allocated. And I believe we will see, well, in the next year, maybe a dozen or so new films about Ukraine, about the glory of Russian, weapons, liberating Mariupol, or some shit.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that not everyone in the industry will take the money, but some will, and there will be movies like that. And you need theaters to screen these movies.
Right.
So probably they will try and save it in some way or form. But the most important players on the theatrical markets were private ones. No idea what will happen to them. Maybe they will buy out, maybe they will go bankrupt and the state will buy out their theaters for peanuts. Maybe they will be nationalized. I mean, you can rule anything out.
Yeah.
And right now, it is so chaotic and so unpredictable that, again, you can generally guess which direction this might go to, and you can guess the shape of things, but not much more. It's so fucked up.
Uh-huh.
It is so fucked up. It was like Russian movies were going to be still Russian movies, but Russia was on the brink of making a serious headway in terms of TV series. There were the platforms that ordered new content, and it was good. It was starting to get good.
Yeah.
It was like next 10 years, we would have seen great Russian shows. Not anymore.
You've been listening to The Naked Pravda, an English language podcast from Meduza. On today's show, we discussed Russia's changing film and television entertainment industry. You heard from Russian filmmaker Egor Isaev, AR content creative executive Ivan Philippov, and Kinopoisk podcast host Lisa Surganova. The Naked Pravda is a podcast from Meduza. It's our only English language show, and I hope you recommend us to your friends and leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you are tuning in to help put this program in front of more people. Also, if you value Meduza's reporting, whether in English or in Russian, or both, please consider making a donation at support.meduza.io/en to help sustain our work. Recurring pledges help the most, but we'll take whatever you can spare, obviously. Thank you for listening, and come back soon.